Well, hello. I am very overdue on posting a video. So, hello from the road. I'm in southern Arizona. I've been sort of crawling along the U.S. Mexico border from Southern California yesterday and today, and heading towards Bisbee, Arizona, if you know where that is. I don't know. I've never been there. I know where it's at on the map. It's about 11 miles north of the Mexican border, but interesting little town, sounds like. So on my way there, just thought I'd kind of check in, taking a little beverage break here on the road, and just wanted to say hello. I'm still alive, and cheers to my friends back home. I won't be cruel, but I just want to point out that it is about 80 degrees today, and when I left Washington, it was me basically digging out of the snow every day. So a blessed relief. And this is what I planned on doing this year, was not being in the wet cold of the Pacific Northwest in January if I could avoid it. Anyway, all that aside, I did want to kind of address an issue that I've been meaning to sort of talk about, and some people have kind of asked me to um, touch base with literature and trying to see clearly, through that lens as much as possible. And, I do want to touch on that to some degree. I was going to do a Orwell 101 today, but, it's such a huge book, really, and it's so thrown around, it's almost cliche. So, if, I do want to touch on Orwell, but, I do want to make it much more, concise and specific, not just, Orwell, because Orwellian and blah, blah. It's really just kind of throwing that term around, just like the Bible. How many people have read the Bible. And even interpretations. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I'm just saying, it varies wildly. So I don't want to toss around Orwell and Orwellian, blah, 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 but rather, kind of pinpoint some central themes, or maybe one central theme. And yes, we know Big Brother's watching you, central theme of hyper surveillance, and all the way down to the thought police, what you're thinking and how you could be incriminated just for the way that you're thinking or what you're thinking about, right? So we know those. Those are the big ones. And then there's the three slogans, right? War is peace, freedom is slavery. But I kind of want to talk about the one that gets overlooked the most, which is ignorance is strength, right? Ignorance is strength. All three of those major slogans kind of fall under the big umbrella, if you will, central theme, one of the many central themes to Orwell in that novel, is doublespeak, his term for basically keeping people confused, saying one thing meaning another, couching the truth in language, okay, and how you base your society on those kinds of that kind of language, okay. So so ignorance is strength, one of the three slogans that is pivotal throughout that entire novel. How do you achieve ignorance, and then why would that be ironically twisted around to become strength? Well, I'll say it this way. I man painfully listened to about 2 hours of H.R. McMaster on the Joe Rogan podcast as I was driving. And so I almost feel like I have to take multiple showers, but no, it's not that. Well, it is that, but I did it as an exercise to, and I'm sure Rogan does this too. He wants people from all persuasions to be on his show, okay, and not attack. He's not a journalist, and that's not his role, and nor should it be. And I'm not expecting to listen to his podcast and be swayed one way or the other, but rather just listen and hear how the conversation goes. So anyway, if you do listen to that podcast, it's one of the more recent ones. That's how ignorance becomes strength, okay? His breakdown, viewpoints, whatever, if you could call his, authorship, I don't see myself ever reading one of his books, but, what he's talking about is basically institutionalized thinking. And he's a huge proponent of conservative think tanks and institutional thinking. And Rogan hardly pushed back on any of that stuff. A little bit when he talked about, false flags and whatnot, and congressional hearings going on about January 6th, where I guess Ted Cruz was questioning some woman, I don't know, about the FBI's involvement, okay, in that. And then he points out, well, it's fact, I guess, that the FBI's involvement in the, what's her name, Whitmer, the kidnapping scheme in Michigan that was predominantly carried out as a infiltration of the FBI to nail this operation, which apparently, they were, they planted the seed for it, I guess, and groomed them to carry through on this thing until, these guys got busted for it and what have you. And then McMaster is just saying, yeah, well, I guess those things happen, but I don't know anything about agent provocateurs and blah, blah, blah. You don't know about agent provocateurs and the history of the FBI? You've never broached the subject of COINTELPRO or any, FBI involvement in the counterculture, certainly in the 60s, and then, various points through our history. You have no knowledge of that whatsoever? And then he just moved on to the next subject. Well, first he had to defend the FBI as being, just a great establishment, basically beyond reproach. And, later on in the podcast, he's talking about, it's all about the fear of Russia and China taking over and how we can't possibly become, complicit in communism becoming part of our national, dialogue or identity, and how these guys are infiltrating us. It's basically institutionalized thinking. We're still at war. Well, still at war. He wants to ramp up the war against China and Russia in all kinds of ways. Keep ballooning the, defense budget and, yada, yada, yada. In essence, institutionalization, right, in all forms, education and military and all of the, major components of our society need to have basically one governing rule, and it's all directed to protect ourselves from the evildoers, of Russia and China. At the same time he's saying that, he basically, when Rogan asks questions, well, how do you do that? He says it's all through education. It's all through education. So as on the one hand, of course, predictably, he's criticizing critical race theory, which he doesn't really speak in terms of what it is and what it teaches, but just how bad it is. It's just completely black and white, good and bad, right? Completely a dualistic binary argument. And it all begins with education. Well, we know what that means. I certainly do. I was in education. I was a teacher for 30 years. And that's indoctrination. And it's, they're trying to indoctrinate through critical race theory. However, we should really be indoctrinating, according to his beliefs, right? That's ignorance. If you only believe one way. And, he's basically saying that censorship is a good thing because it gets rid of misinformation, yada, yada, yada. We hear this through the media, major media anyway. And that's how you do it. You listen to this guy, you listen to this argument, you listen to that argument, you grow up in public education or in any education, right, in this country, and pretty much in every country, I'm sure, and that's it. That's not it. That's the dualistic blah, 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 mop instead of sweep kind of argument, you're either a Republican or you're a Democrat, instead of looking big picture and going, well, what's the antidote to that kind of thinking? How do you actually get outside of that box or those boxes, right? And do differently, think differently. And then anything that's brought up as far as doing things individualistically, right? Or thinking for yourself. Or, I mean, immediately he goes to, well, that's conspiracy theory, that's bad information, that should be banned off of all, blah, blah, blah platforms. Really? No. No, no, no. It's not. And then, those people, right, who have criticism of the institutions, they're crazy, and on and on and on. And how we need to get, they all love to say that nonpartisan, we all need to come together, kumbaya. No, we don't. No. We need to build local communities based on people who have done their research individualistically and have tapped into very, very, rational points of view that point out evidentiary evidence that points to what's really going on or the cracks in the system. When the NSA is brought up in this, podcast or whatever, it's shot down. No, let me put it a different way. Any criticism of the NSA is shot down. Of course, the institution is all benevolent and great and whatever. I'm waiting for Rogan to shoot the question at him, but I already know the answer, right? About Snowden. They don't, of course. So any criticism of these institutions is just flat out bad, traitorous, crazy, conspiratorial, and so on and so forth. Okay? This is how Orwell talks about doublespeak. Euphemistically, in all ways, using language basically to say there's only one point of view, and it is the party's point of view that should be upheld at all cost, and all other viewpoints should be shot down. Again, I'll go back and say it again and again and again. The true American, in my estimation, and he's the one who fundamentally was the example for, not only Martin Luther King, but Mahatma Gandhi, and any other person who has stood up against the big institutions, including Mark Twain, right, was Henry David Thoreau. Go to the woods, build your cabin, raise your food, trade for what you need with your community members and build that small community. And right away, when McMaster's kind of, asked anything about that, it's basically, no, that's tribalism. That is not tribalism. And even if it is tribalism, okay, well, tribes have been around for thousands and thousands of years. They weren't all crazy, and they aren't lunatics, fighting against, good, for evil purposes, and that's what we think now that tribalism has to be. No, you can form your tribe, you can form whatever you want based on anything that you want, and that's your freedom to do. That's just thinking globally, acting locally, doing what you can within your, tribe or whatever you want to call it, or your community. Okay, this is empowerment. If you just throw it into the hands of the central government without any critique whatsoever, then you're giving up that power. You're giving up that individual, premise that Henry David Thoreau said was, total freedom. Even going so far as to not pay your taxes and willing to go to jail for it, which Thoreau did. Okay? So, in listening to McMaster and tying it in with Orwell, and this is just, one small piece of it all, that's how ignorance becomes strength. And then you see it, of course, in the pandemic, when people don't question anything. They just sort of comply. And if you think differently, which, sure, when I've met with friends along this journey that I'm on right now, they're kind of looking at me and they've said as much, why are you making this so hard, right? You just put on the fucking mask, call it a day. Why do you gotta, and I can't really push back as to the why. I know why, but convincing somebody else why it's in their best interest to say no and quote unquote make it, stop with the air quotes, right? Hard on yourself. It's not making it hard on yourself. It's standing up for your principles, your beliefs, and your strength and power as an individual. That's what you're doing. And questioning the validity, the rationale of what the others who are trying to push an agenda onto you is all about, and trying to see clearly, right? And that's the whole why. That's the answer to the why. That's the antidote, right? Is that's why I don't think I'm making it hard on myself, but that's how they see it, okay? That's hard work. I get it. Maybe so. Maybe it is easier just to comply. Of course it is, right? Just don't make waves. Go along with it. Do what you need to do. Just, you know, stop fighting. Stop fighting. Standing up for yourself, knowing what you know, gaining more knowledge, being rational as a human being, thinking your way through problems, problem solving on the basis that you can do something about whatever you want to do about, in joining hands with your, your locals, your neighbors, your community, and with like-minded people, forming your tribe, as it were, okay? That's taking your power back. That's not exactly fighting, although it is resisting that shit, but it is powerful, and I hope that's how people are thinking. And I know that lots of people are thinking along those lines, and I think that's our only hope getting through this and continuing on in some sane, matter-of-fact way. All right, that's my little check-in for today. I hope I can kind of, make a few more videos and stay, much more dialed in. Kind of got away from that. Not even do one of those, travel log kind of things where when I do get to Bisbee or some of these ghost towns that I'm aiming for, I can check in, kind of show you, what I'm seeing firsthand, and pass it along. There's some cool spots, most definitely, and some differences along the way. So I'll try to point those out as well. All right, hope everybody's doing well, and talk to you soon.